Sabaidee. Hi everybody. So thank you for joining us for week 4, our Lao learning session. And this week we're going to learn the next 5 consonants in our list of consonants. Okay, we're going to learn numbers 16 through 20 if you're counting the letters, okay, the consonant letters. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to cover a question that someone asked this week about the phonetic spelling of the letters. You may have noticed that in the Lao Learning channel, the way that they phonetically spell the name of the letters is with this OR ending. So they would pronounce this letter TAW, but they spell it TOR. So this is an Asian pronunciation, okay, for Asian speaking persons. This would be their phonetic spelling of the pronunciation of that sound, aw, okay. Sometimes in some of the apps you'll also see it written as TOH. You might see it written as TOR, TAW, okay. Even for the word ball, like no, you might see it written BO, okay, but literally what they're trying to get at is the sound. The sound is really what we want. So just recognize that this OR ending is the same as in our slides. We're using the AW, okay, and we're using AW with our slides because that's the easiest English way what we recognize as that aw sound, AW. Okay, that's probably the most familiar way to phonetically spell that sound. Okay, but either one is fine. This week you'll see not just AW, but next to it you'll also see the OR spelling, just as a reference for this week. All right, so just to wrap that up, Lao Learning Channel uses OR for the aw sound, as in gaw, caw, caw. And in our Lao learning sessions, we use AW to make that same sound, as in gaw, caw, caw. But literally, it's the sound that we're focusing on. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to get into our lesson for this week, week 4. And the first letter that we're going to review is paw. Okay, paw. This letter represents the P sound. Okay, so the letter name is paw, and the word that's associated with paw is pung. Pung. Okay, paw, pung. Okay, and pung means bee. The next letter that we're going to learn is faw. Now, if you notice, these two letters look like the English alphabet letter W. Okay, they resemble the W with a few nuances, a few differences. So this letter is faw, and if you notice, it has a tail here. Okay, so some of our letters are written with a tail, okay, and a loop, and some don't have this tail. But for faw, if you remember that faw has a tail, you'll be doing well. Okay, and the word that's associated with faw, this faw, is fun. Fun. Okay, fun. Okay, not fun like we're having fun, but fun. Fun. Okay, fun. Almost a long O sound. Fun. Fun. Okay, and that means rain. The next letter, if you notice, again, is the same as the very first letter, the same sound, paw. This letter is called paw, and it makes the same P sound, all right, or very similar P sound. And the word associated with this letter paw is poo. Poo. Paw, poo. Poo meaning mountain. The next letter is another fa. So if you notice, there's 2 letters that represent the P sound and 2 letters that represent the F sound. This is the second of the F's. Fa, same name, same sound. Okay? And the word that's associated with this fa is fi. Fa, fi. Almost sounds like the word fire, because that's what it means. But that's just phonetic, okay? But it sounds very similar. So if you can remember fa, fi, and fi meaning fire, then you will do well. And again, this fa also has a tail, okay? All right. We're going to look a little closer at that in a few minutes. The last letter that we're going to learn this week is the letter ma. Ma. And ma represents the M sound. And the word that is associated with ma is male. Ma, male. Male meaning cat. It almost sounds like meow in English. Okay, male, male, meaning cat. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at what we call consonant nuances, and those are letters that look similar but sound different. And what we're going to do for a moment, we're just going to concentrate on the letters from this week, okay? So the letters that look similar but sound different. Okay, so the first letter that we learned was paw, and the nuance is that it has 2 loops, okay, that both point to the inside. That's your hint for paw, and it's even across the top, okay? So this letter has 2 loops, and it's even across the top. That is paw. The next letter is fa. That was the second letter we learned this week, today. So fa has 1 loop that points to the inside of the letter and a tail that points to the right. So remember, fa has a tail, paw does not have a tail. Okay? The next paw has 1 loop, okay, 1 loop that points to the outside of the letter, and it's even across the top, no loop on the other side. But now you're seeing that both paws are even across the top, and one has 2 loops that point to the inside. This one has 1 loop that points to the outside. But your key is that it's even across the top. Looks like a W in the English alphabet, but it's even across the top. So the 2 paws are even, and the 2 faws are not even. The 2 faws for the letter F have tails and 1 loop. This last fa has a loop that points or faces the outside of the letter. And then the letter ma looks very similar to the letter that we learned last week. And instead of it having a loop at the top, ma has a loop at the bottom left. Okay, the other letter that we learned last week had a loop at the top. Do you remember what that letter was? It also had a stem at the bottom left instead of a loop. And there it is. It's the letter na. Okay, so this letter looks very similar to ma. Okay, looks like similar to the English alphabet letter U, but it has a loop at the top left and a stem at the bottom left, where ma has no loop at the top left and a loop at the bottom left instead of a stem. But they both resemble the English alphabet letter U. Okay? But this is the letter that we're learning this week, ma. Here's a closer look at the 2 paws. Okay, the 2 P's. Paw, again, 2 loops, two loops both facing inside, and 1 loop facing outside, but the key is that they're both even across the top. Okay, paw and faw both have one loop. One face is inside, one face is outside, but your key is they both have a tail. Okay, and they're not even across the top. So if they have a tail, it's faw. Okay, if they do not have a tail and they're even across the top, it's paw. Okay, so if you think of an animal parts, the paw is not the tail, it's the leg, it's the foot. Okay, but if it has a tail, it's faw. If it does not have a tail, it's paw. Okay, so now let's review the consonants from this week that we learned. And actually, we're reviewing all the consonant nuances that we've learned so far. So this would represent all of the letters that look similar that we've learned so far, but they sound differently. Now, do you remember what these two letters are? One has a tail, and one does not have a tail. It's even across the top. These are the letters baw and baw. Okay, baw and baw. Baw and baw. Okay, this one just a little bit harder. How about these two? Do you remember what the differences are between these two? And what the letter names are? We've got gaw, okay, again, loops facing outside. Taw, this loop on the bottom is facing inside. But the key is, to tell them apart, taw has a tail, okay? Taw has a tail. Okay, very good. How about these two? Do you remember the difference between these two? Do you remember what these letters are? Okay, we've got caw on the left. The nuance is that the hump is on the top. And we've got nyaw on the right, and the hump is on the bottom. Okay, caw and nyaw. Okay, do you remember what these two are? Now again, your key is that they're even across the top. These are paw, both of them. Okay, they're even across the top. They look like a W. They are paw. How about these? What are these? They both have a tail. Okay, both have a tail. So what letter is this? Are these? These are the letters faw. Okay, both of them same name, same or similar sound, faw, like the letter F. Okay? And how about these two? Do you remember the difference between these two? What these are again? Okay, we've got gnaw on here, over here, on the left, one loop and a stem, and we've got maw on the right, no loop at the top left, but a loop at the bottom left. You got it? Okay. So now we're going to have a sight reading practice. Again, just the letters that we're learning this week, and I'm going to keep them in the order that you learned them, just to make it a little bit easier on your brain, okay? We're going to keep them in that same sequence that we learned today, okay? And you're going to see them a couple of times, but in the same sequence, okay? Here we go. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at a complete review of all the consonants that you've learned so far. Okay? So each consonant is only represented one time. Okay? So here we go. Remember what that letter is? Okay, so how are you doing so far? Okay, very good. The last thing we're going to consider this week is the expression Sabaidee. So let's just review. Many of you are probably already familiar with this, but just for the sake of those who are still just learning from the beginning, we're going to explain what the expression Sabaidee actually means. What is it that we're saying when we say Sabaidee? So the expression actually deals with your state of well-being, okay? And the expression Sabaidee can mean hello. It can mean how are you. It can also mean I am fine. It can also mean are you well. It can also mean I am well. Okay? So when you say Sabaidee, you could actually, as we spoke about in the very first lesson in person, we mentioned that you could actually have a conversation just using the word Sabaidee. If you said Sabaidee, then the next person that you're talking to might say Sabaidee. All right? If you say Sabaidee ball, then they may say Sabaidee. Okay? Ball meaning yes, right? Okay? Or no. Okay? Sabaidee ball might mean you're well, no? Right? How are you? You are well, no? Are you well? No? Okay? Okay. So you can say hello, how are you? I'm fine. Are you well? Or I am well, using the expression Sabaidee. And that's because it's made up of two parts. Sabai, which actually means well, fine, and can refer to being healthy, and D, which means good. So if you say Sabaidee to someone, Sabaidee ball, common response might be Koi Sabai, which means I'm fine. Okay, now this expression was given to me by someone who actually speaks Laotian, Sabai, and you're actually saying I am well, fine, healthy. Okay, kind of emphasis on the fact that you're doing well. All right, so Koi Sabai or just Sabai can actually mean I'm fine. So if somebody says Ciao Sabaidee ball, ciao is you, Sabaidee is fine, well, healthy, right? And ball means right, yes, correct. You are well, correct? Ciao Sabaidee ball, you are well, correct? You are healthy, you are fine, yes? And if you say Koi Sabai or Koi Sabai or Sabai, you're saying I'm fine. Okay? And what was mentioned to me was that this is very common, Sabai. So you don't necessarily have to say Sabaidee for I am fine. You can say Sabai, and you're still saying I'm fine. Okay? So it's just like in English, if someone says, hey, how are you? And then you say, good. Sabai is basically you're saying, when you say good, you're saying I'm fine. When you say Sabai, you're saying I'm fine. All right? So there's our lesson for this week. D-Lai, good work. Okay, very good. So by the time you see this lesson, the practice sheets will also be loaded onto the webpage, posted onto the webpage for your review. Okay? So again, remember those differentiations between paw and faw, those 4 letters, okay? And then the differentiation between maw and gnaw, you'll be doing good, okay? So we have 5 letters. Next week, we're going to cover the last 7 letters of the consonants, and we'll cover them all together. And by next week, after next week, we will have gone through all of the Lao consonants. And then we'll move on to some other things in addition to the vowels. All right, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.